so much of the college recruiting process is awkward, right? Like literally everything is so awkward.
It's not a natural social process.
No.
Nothing about career, there's nothing natural about a career fair.
Welcome to The Bottom Line, a Fowler Coordinator podcast done in partnership with the F. David Fowler Career Center. It's a show where we speak to students, leaders, and professionals in the DC area to help you succeed both in and out of school. My name is Eric Spector. I'm a senior studying real estate, and in this episode, I'm accompanied by my fellow Fowler Coordinator, Sarah Bobb, who is a junior majoring in accounting. We're joined today by Christopher Kalloo. Chris is a GWSB alum and current recruiter for Macy's. He has a passion for helping students find professional success and has become a valuable resource for both myself and many other GWSB students. In this episode, Chris talks about his time at GW, how he ended up in his current role, and the do's and don'ts of recruiting. As an experienced recruiter, he gives a lot of great advice regarding job searching in college. So without any further ado, I give you Christopher Kalloo.
Christopher Kalloo, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Really excited for it.
So you are the perfect candidate to have on here because you're both a GW alum. Well, not both, but you were a GW alum, you're Fowler Coordinator, and now you recruit at GW. So you know basically all around what the perfect GW student should be in all aspects.
I'm the triple threat. I'm excited to chat. This is obviously my passion. I turned it into a career, so something I love talking about all the time.
So I want to first start off your career in GW. When you first got here, what did you want to do with your life? Did you have a career path in mind?
Yeah, so when I first joined, I chose business because it was very vague, it was very general. I feel like it could apply to a lot of different things. As I started to take classes, as I took internships, I really narrowed down in marketing. I thought marketing, that's it. I just selected that as my concentration. That's what I want to do for a career. I took internships in social media, I did sales, and I felt like that was where I was going. And then as I got a little closer to graduation, I realized that wasn't it. I took an internship, thought it was my dream internship my senior year, doing almost exactly what I thought I was going to be doing, and I absolutely hated it. It was a great experience. I really appreciated it, but I really did not enjoy the work. It was not nearly as meaningful in what I was looking for or what I thought I was looking for. So my senior year, I became very flexible in terms of the career opportunities I was looking for. So came into kind of the career internship conversations, really looking at marketing, and ended up going a completely different track.
Yeah, I think a lot of students find that trouble like junior year because that's when they really go deep into their core courses. I know, luckily I was not one of them. I knew when I came in here I wanted to do accounting, and I knew after my first class that that's not what I wanted to do. Having said that, I know a lot of students who do a couple of accounting classes and they love it, and then they find out senior year that's not necessarily where they want to end up. So you found out around senior year as well, right? But you found a way out of marketing to do what you do now. Is that
yeah.
Right?
So I took that internship fall, and probably the first few weeks of September, it was kind of when I had that realization. So I still had the fall recruiting season to check things out. And so, being a Fowler Coordinator, I was obviously helping and working with a lot of employer events, and happened to go to the Macy's event. And a lot of my friends will say it literally kind of clicked. I was at this Macy's event, and I really enjoyed how they were talking. I enjoyed how they were talking about the culture. But I was sitting there, I was like, I don't want what they're recruiting for. I want the recruiter's job. Literally, and I couldn't focus for the rest of the event. Right, they were talking about all these exciting things that I now talk about, but I couldn't care less about what they were saying. And the first thing that I did right after the event is I rushed up to the recruiter and I was like, hey, fantastic event. I don't want these jobs, I want your job. And that, build a relationship with them. That person's still a mentor to me today. But it was all about kind of building that network, building that relationship, and there ended up being an opportunity where I could go into an HR development program, which is what I did.
So how did you officially make the decision to sort of re-recruit? And if there's a student who they were on the same track for their entire 3 years until senior year. They did their one internship after their junior year in that summer, and they realized they didn't like it, but they feel like it's too late to kind of change things up. What sort of advice would you give to those students?
I think it's never too late. It's, as 3 Days Grace said, it's not too late, it's never too late. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to make the right decision for our first job out of college, right? That's literally my career. I'm the manager of college recruiting. I recruit people for their first job, and there's a lot of pressure on that. But that doesn't dictate the rest of your life, right? And I think that that's so tough to think about long term, since you are here. There's such a focus on getting that internship that leads to the full-time offer and accepting that full-time offer, and your dreams are made. Your first job, while important, it doesn't dictate the rest of your career success. Another one of my mentors, she quit her first job out of college after 2 or 3 months. She really realized it wasn't for her, and then she immediately jumped. So I think that the fact that you're finding out, if you find out your senior year, that's an amazing time to find out, because that's when people are still recruiting. That's when you can still talk to your great career center. That's when you can still have those conversations. I think that if you find out your senior year, great. If you find out a year or two after college, that's also perfectly fine, right? I think that you want to, if you can find that fit right out of college, amazing, and I'm so happy for you. But I know so many people don't find that fit that soon, and it's perfectly normal and it's perfectly great.
So as a recruiter then, how often can you tell when you come across a student who does this, who goes through this process of maybe joining Macy's, but you can tell that they don't actually want to do that with their lives? What sort of advice do you give them?
I think keep an open mind. So before I went to the Macy's event, I had never considered retail, right? I thought retail was just folding sweaters. I didn't know the depth of the opportunities there. And I'd never considered recruiting, really. Going into this event, I really had not considered either. It just kind of clicked for me. It was really weird that I had an aha moment. I don't think that's very typical. But I think going to those events, had I not gone to that event, I wouldn't have had that moment. So something that I push everybody to do, especially at GW, where at times you can feel like you're pushed into these specific tracks, try something new. Have conversations with somebody that you never would have considered having a conversation for. Only 20% of my hires have previous retail or previous fashion experience.
Right.
80% of them, most of the time if you ask them, they're like, oh, I had no idea what this career was until I had a conversation with Chris. Mm-hmm. And then they learn a little bit more, and then they get excited, and then they find the future. And I feel like it's that way for so many other industries as well.
Yeah, it's really sad when students just have these expectations of where they should go just because the crowd is going there, but then they don't realize that they shouldn't actually be doing it until maybe 5 years into their careers. So it's behoove of students to actually learn as soon as possible before they try to enter these different career paths.
So I know you mentioned you went to this event and that's how you had this aha moment, but what sorts of resources did you find the most helpful at GWSB with respect to switching your career field, and what sorts of resources would you recommend students use at GWSB?
Yeah, this is 100% biased, but the Career Center. Even as a recruiter, it's something that the Career Center is the most underutilized but most important resource that schools truly have. Obviously, I have so many mentors that are still in the Career Center. I had so many conversations. Kathleen Duffy, I don't know if I'm supposed to use names, but she has had, before going into Career Center, she was a career professional in human resources.
Right.
So before I had my super debt, I sat down with her for an hour and just talked about HR, because I was still so new to it. It was such a new kind of revelation for me that I just sat with her and I talked about her career, and she really helped me prepare. Irina was somebody that helped really build that connection with that recruiter, right? The recruiter kind of had that initial conversation, was probably like, okay, what's going on? And then Irina was like, no, Chris is taking this very seriously. Yeah. Have a conversation with him. He's not just messing around.
Right, you get that further level of communication with her.
And so I think that the Career Center, these people have careers in themselves. They have seen countless students go into so many different careers. And so by having had that relationship with the people at the Career Center, it just made this transition so easy. And again, I had no background in it, but I was able to talk about the previous experiences that I had, and they were helping me pivot the conversation that I was talking about. So even though it was a internship in sales, or I was working at the Career Center, they were able to tie it back and make it into that HR language that Macy's was looking for.
So we talked a lot about mentors within GW and within these companies, but did you have any mentors outside that you sort of, talk to about all this, about your issues, about professional issues or personal issues at your school? Did anyone else outside of the school help you in your development at all?
Absolutely. This is something where family, my sister is in business as well, so she was something that I leaned on heavily. Previous internship boss was somebody that I still had a really good relationship with, and was somebody where I was able to go to, and they knew that wasn't necessarily my career path. I think they had kind of seen it, and so they got very excited for me, and was somebody that when I finally got that offer, those were the people that I immediately reached out to and was like, bothering them constantly, like texting, calling, and they were a sounding board. And at the end of the day, it really ended up being my decision, but having had those, either family or having previous intern bosses or just people that I've met kind of along the way helped me at the end of the college recruiting process was so helpful, because again, it was such a new area for me that I just knew so little. And there was also actually an alumni that was related to the job that I was working my senior year, and he was in HR and he was in recruiting. So that was another person that I actually had just met. And he was an alumni and in recruiting, and he was so excited when I was interested in HR as a GW alum that he also, put himself out there for me as well. So I think that mentors really along the way, both old ones being family, old intern mentors, or ones I'd literally met during that process, all were so instrumental in that help.
Do you still talk to them?
Yeah.
The old ones, rather?
Yeah, I'm still connected. I probably could be doing a better job keeping them in the loop, but that's something that is on me. But I definitely still career updates, chatting about life, and my sister obviously hears a lot from me as well. So
yeah, I've always because I have had previous mentors as well, and I've always felt guilty not reaching out to them, because then I feel like I just use them to get to the next step. But people appreciate it whenever you reach out, if it's 6 months to a year later. Do you have any experience with that?
Yes. And I'm going to ask you, kind of like changing gears a little bit. So I know that I have had people who I've gone on informational interviews with, and I email them every now and again, but it always feels a little awkward, with that initial, hi, how are you doing? Let's catch up again.
Right.
So how did you handle that when you were reaching out to mentors, and then also when students are reaching out to you? What's the best way to go about doing that? Because I know, as a FYDP mentor, a lot of my students have asked me how they should send those emails, and I tell them what I do, but even I feel awkward sometimes sending them. So yeah.
So much of the college recruiting process is awkward, right?
Yeah.
Literally everything is so awkward.
It's not a natural social process.
No.
Nothing about career. There's nothing natural about a career fair.
No.
I'm young, right? 24. I've never seen anything like a career fair outside of a career fair before.
Right.
So much of the recruiting process is awkward, and I think a lot of people understand and appreciate that. I have a mentee who is very structured in how she reaches out to me. She'll reach out to me every 6 months, shoot me an email, and I love it. And I feel like it probably feels awkward to her, but I really appreciate it, because she'll just give me life updates and then ask about how are things with me, right? So it's a paragraph of life updates. Oh, I was able to do this, just got a job in the retail industry, been able to do this, and this. I'm really excited about this. How's everything going with you? How's recruiting season? And it starts this really great conversation, and then obviously it kind of dies off as we both get busy, and then a few months later she'll reach out. And so that's some people's style, where they literally will have a calendar reminder, and it feels weird, but I promise it really does work kind of on the mentor side. But other people who I've recruited before, they'll reach out when they do need something, and that I don't necessarily think of that as bad, because we've had a previous relationship before. I think of it as normal. I'd rather them reach out to me when they need me than not reach out to me because they feel weird and they feel like they're using me, right? If we have a previous relationship, obviously if it's somebody I don't really know, or we haven't talked before and they reach out, oftentimes I'm willing to help. But if it's somebody I have a previous relationship and they reach out when, hey, I'm going through this interview next week, can we do interview prep? Or, oh, I'm interested in this opportunity at Macy's. I so love when they reach out to me. I never feel like I'm getting used.
So you never feel like it's forced? Because I know a lot of times when I send those emails, I feel like I'm forcing it, and I've had students ask me, how do you do this without it sounding like kind of fake or forced, or you know what I mean? So like, do you ever feel that way when students are sending you these like emails that's basically like clockwork, like every 6 months you get the same email?
It only seems forced if it is forced.
Okay.
If it comes from a genuinely authentic place, it comes out, right? Like the mentee who kind of sends the 6 months,
Right.
like she's very excited, like she talks about all the great projects she's been able to work on, and she's genuinely interested in connecting with me, right? Like she hasn't asked me for anything yet. I'm sure, I mean, I want a recruiter now, right? The second she gets to the eligible age, like she's the first person I'm going to talk to.
Right.
But it's authentic when you're being authentic. If you're sending it just as a FYDP assignment, right, and you're
Right.
actually not interested, like I promise you, and I get that a lot, like it doesn't resonate with me, right? And I more often than not, people will give you the benefit of the doubt. That's just, business. People want to see the best in people. But I promise it will feel weird. You're going to hit send. You'll be like, oh my God, that was the most awkward email I've ever sent in my life. But I promise it won't be received that way.
I have on Google that 5-second thing where I can undo it if I really regret. Luckily, I've never had to click it, but it's always there if I need to.
Just in case.
So I want to ask you about these like on-campus recruiting events.
Mm-hmm.
You must see so many awkward students come up to you, right? They think they're doing something they're supposed to do, but it's very awkward because it's their first time. I'm sure you have some stories to tell, but what are like the common don'ts that students typically do?
Yeah, I mean, just from this semester, I probably have countless stories. I think that there's a lot of things that you can and can't do, right? I try and keep it very basic. Right, I think you should be preparing yourself and setting yourself up for success. Right, like you really don't want to be going into a career fair winging it.
Right.
I think that obviously people listening to this are probably students. Time is such a limited resource, but I think that doing a little due diligence up front is just going to make any event, whether it's a career fair or an information session, it's just going to make it more useful and productive for your time. So I'll use career fair as just kind of the stereotypical, like common career event example. Do a little bit of research, right? Choose 3 companies that you're really excited about. And more often than not, like you're only going to a career fair for a few companies. So take 20 minutes, 15 minutes, do a little bit of research, know what they're recruiting for, know the eligibility, and know a little bit about the role, a little bit about the industry. I think that if you have a busy career fair, you'll have maybe 2 or 3 minutes with the recruiter. If a minute of the 3 minutes, if a third of the time is me explaining to you what next steps are and explaining that whether you're eligible for the internship or not, that's a third of the time away from you getting the questions that you actually want answered, right? Like what's the culture of the company? How do I drive the business? And it's less time for you to sell, right? Because a career fair really is, I take notes. I understand a lot after career fair, who I want to interview, who I don't want to interview. So I think that having done that research, you're going to have a third of your time back to actually stand out, actually get the information that you want, and actually impress the people there. So I think doing a little bit of research, how I bucket my research is into kind of the big 3. So it's industry research. So for Macy's, it's the retail industry, right? There's so many things going on in the retail industry, a lot of exciting initiatives, a lot of exciting companies doing a lot of different things. So that's kind of the highest level. Then it's the company within the industry. Obviously, Macy's has been around for a while. We're a big player in it, but we're also repivoting a lot of our strategies to be more innovative, to get to a younger customer. So where is that company's place within the greater industry? So kind of that next step down, and the next step down within that is the specific role, right? A lot of these companies, whether it's Macy's or other people like Deloitte or PwC, who really recruit a lot at GW, often they recruit for a few different roles. So, and just speaking of retail, there's countless jobs within their industry. What is that specific role and what are you doing day to day? So there's kind of 3 buckets that I recruit for, and so often people start at that low level, just looking at the role, but the industry and the company are also incredibly important.
Okay, I'd like to backtrack a little bit to the career fairs.
Mm-hmm.
Even if a student in those 3 minutes, those potential 3 minutes that they have, does everything right and they impress you, but because you're meeting hundreds of people today, in that day, you won't necessarily remember their face or their name, and does that matter to them, to their potential ability to be hired by your company?
Absolutely. I at a crazy career fair, I'm thinking University of Arizona is one of the largest schools in the country. You know, I will talk to 200 people easily. That's probably on the low end, right? I have other people with me. That's another 200, 600 people total. Even if I'm obsessed with you and I love you, I'll do what I can to remember you. But chances are, just game of numbers, like there's a good chance I won't. That's where the follow-up becomes so incredibly important, right? If I talk to 100 people, maybe I really like 50. Of the 50, maybe 30 send me an email. Of the 30 that send me an email, maybe 15 go to my event, right? Those 15 who I have gotten an email from, have come several times, like those are the 15 people that I'm selecting to interview before I even look at resumes. Those are people, I literally have a stack of resumes at my desk of people I want to interview weeks before my resume drop happens. And those are people that I had great conversations with, they followed up, because recruiting is a little bit like dating, right? You want to feel that reciprocal interest, right? You don't want to be ghosted or anything along those lines. And so having them follow up, ask great questions, having done their research, like that just makes them stand out so more. And oftentimes, I'll have conversations like, I want to interview you. Like, this is our third time meeting. Like, I feel like I can hug you at this point. I want to interview you. And I think a lot of people, and I'm not saying you do this for every company, right? Again, your time is limited. But if you do have that dream company or you do have that dream role or, at least your top few choices, like you can do that and still not spend an exorbitant amount of time doing recruiting related things.
That goes back to the research then, because if you know a few companies that you'd potentially want to join, you can spend all your time, instead of just sending your resume out to 50 companies, it would be way more better to just spend your time researching these companies, finding out what you'd actually enjoy, than spending all your time actually talking to those recruiters. Because a majority of these students don't even do that, and so your chances of success are way higher.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think it starts with a little bit of self-reflection. Like, what are you looking for?
Right.
Understand do you want to be analytical? Do you want to be more creative? Is it a mix? Do you find, do you want to be in the specific industry? Do you want to be doing business development? Like, if you do a little self-reflection, understand what you're going for, that's going to narrow the companies that you're going to be having conversations with. And so I think that doing self-reflection, then looking to see, I don't know the exact numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if 80% of GW School of Business people are hired by 10 companies, right? That may be an exaggeration, but it's, definitely a majority of the company or majority of students are hired by a handful of firms. And so understand who is always here. If you always see Deloitte, if you always see a Macy's, go to one or two of the events, even if even if you don't think of it, because obviously a lot of your peers have resonated with it, and those companies tend to like GW students for a reason. So go to the event just to learn, see what it's about, because you may surprise yourself. Because again, they're there. The companies spend the time, they spend the money, they spend the resources to be here for a reason.
So I know a lot of students really stress out at career fairs about the initial contact between themselves and a recruiter, and they're like, how do I start that conversation? And one of the things we stress at GWSB are elevator pitches. So from the recruiter perspective, how often do you hear elevator pitches? Does it turn into more of a conversation, or do students actually come up to you and say, hi, I'm Sarah, I'm studying XYZ, like blah, blah, blah? Do elevator pitches really play a role in how much you remember the student and how they can kind of wow you in those 3 minutes that they get with you?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I get a lot of elevator pitches. I think there are a lot of really great parts of an elevator pitch, and I think there are really awful parts of an elevator pitch. And it's where you are kind of in that spectrum. So I think that if you come up to me and you do the same elevator pitch than you did to the table next to me, and that's an insurance company, and you do that to the same pitch to the company next to them, and that's a nonprofit, that's not a good elevator pitch, right? That's something that if you can have the three completely different companies, you have that same pitch about yourself, none of the three companies are going to like you, right? So that elevator pitch that's very vague and general, I don't think that ever works out. Elevator pitches that are targeted towards the company, right? You shouldn't be having the same conversation with me as maybe even other retailer. They can be very similar, but definitely not another industry, right? So I think elevator pitches that are targeted towards the company are really, really important in the role that you're looking for. I think that elevator pitches where it's unnatural, and I think a lot of this is unnatural,
Right.
So to expand a little bit more on that, where I say, hi, how are you? It's like, hi, my name is Chris. I'm a junior marketing concentration, and they go on. And like, I promise recruiters are people too.
Right.
Really, recruiters are like genuine people. Like, I have friends, I have family. Like, have a conversation with me.
Right.
And it will feel like just awkward small talk, but it really is like a lot of roles, communication skills is important, right? For us, like we recruit for so many different roles, they're all very collaborative. Like if you can't have an okay conversation with a recruiter up front, like why would I allow you to have a conversation with one of our vendors, right? So I think that just being a person, like making jokes, like being light at times will really go a long way. So I think that elevator pitches that are targeted, but also reading the room a little bit, right? Asking how their day is going, and use kind of the questions to lead into why you're there. Oh, it's great that you're having a great day. You know, I was really excited to chat with you because I was actually really interested in your internship program. You know, I find myself to be very analytical, but also love the creative side, and I know your internship program has aspects of that. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the day-to-day of an intern looks like? Like, there is definitely elevator pitch aspects to that, right? You talk a little bit about your analytical ability, you talk a little bit about your creative side. That is what the core of an elevator pitch is, talking about what you want to represent yourself with. But it doesn't come off as a pitch, right? Because it comes off as conversational, and ending with that question, you know, putting the ball in their court, you know, you're showing that you're prepared, that you have the skill set, and that you're genuinely interested because you are kind of digging into more of the details.
So, I mean, we talked a lot about these career fairs and these events where you're speaking to all these students for a few minutes at a time, but how often do students reach out to you on LinkedIn or just outside of these official events? Because these schools, as you know, they can only do these a few times per semester, right? Although you do it like, the entire...
the entire semester.
Right, but as, GW students, we only go to maybe a few a semester.
Yeah.
So how often do you get students reaching out to you, and what's the best, do you have any advice for students who want to do that if they didn't, if they weren't able to catch you at a career fair?
It is hysterical how few people
Really?
slide in my LinkedIn DMs for lack of a better phrase. It's so funny.
Okay.
As a recruiter, a great person reaching out to me on LinkedIn.
So easy.
Oh my God!
Make your job super easy.
I hired somebody off of that.
Really?
They didn't go to a school that I recruit at.
Okay.
They reached out to me. Hey Chris, saw that you're a recruiter. Wonder if you could put me in the right direction. And they did a really quick blurb about themselves, why they are a good fit for the program. They went to Duke. I don't go anywhere near Duke. I got that message. I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, it just made my job so easy.
Okay.
Immediately I called her a week later, and I'm like, she was amazing. She'd done her research. She was really well prepared. Even though she hadn't gone to an event, I got her hired, from LinkedIn message to getting the offer in probably a handful of weeks. It's crazy. It's so underutilized, and my name is so easily found, right? Even if you look up like recruiter
Right.
at Macy's or college relations at Macy's, like I am going to be one of the top people. And I'm so often on campus that it's not hard to find my name. It's astounding. Now, I don't want this to turn into everybody reaching out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's maybe been a mistake. Depending on how many people this actually reaches.
Christopher Kalloo, guys, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But it's funny how few people take that step, even if it seems like a no-brainer. It really is an easy way. And now I will say, on the other side, recruiters are very busy. So this isn't like the life hack to get the job, right? Like there are times where the recruiter may not answer, they're super busy, maybe they're not recruiting for that role. Like this isn't a way to skip the career fair, but it is definitely a way to stand out outside of the resume drop. It really is.
Yeah, I think I know I took LinkedIn for granted. And I started using it as an experiment because I realized how many students I was competing against in these career fairs, and I said, I'm better one-on-one. Let's just make it one-on-one. So that's what I've been doing recently. Do you have a specific question?
Yeah, it's semi-related, but a lot of freshmen ask if they should be going to career fairs. So when you're at a career fair, you're mostly looking for like juniors and seniors.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do get that freshman or sophomore, are you interested in talking to them, or what are you really looking for from them?
So I will start off. I think it's very valuable
Okay.
for everybody at every level to go to a career fair. I think one, it's about tying back to what we were talking about earlier, is just learning what's out there, right? Just like having conversations with different people. I think that's so important. And I think a career fair is a great way to set aside that time to structurally have those new conversations. You know, if I have time, I will chat a freshman's ear off, right? It is kind of about maybe they go into and I think you can time it, right? You can go to the career fair early, you have a lot of time. You know, I love to chat with them, but if I have a long line, that'll be like hey, keep in touch, like I'll send you on your way pretty quickly. But I think that outside of the recruiting process, like you can, as a freshman, you know, I have conversations with freshmen, you know, not necessarily during the thick of recruiting season, I'll push them off, but I love having conversations about it, right? There's no better feeling as a recruiter than somebody in an interview saying, I've been looking forward to chatting with Macy since I was a freshman. You know, my eyes light up, I get so excited. And people who aren't in recruiting, I swear, you know, when I have executives in the business interview, that's always something they bring up. Well, they're so interested, they've been coming to Macy's since they're a freshman. And I'm like, technically not important in terms of skill set, but it reflects so positively on you and your interest in whether you would accept the role.
So that is the life hack. LinkedIn is not, but
Starting early.
I don't know if many other students have this issue, but I know I did when I first started job searching. Anytime I did reach out to a recruiter and I didn't get a response back, I took it personally, because that's just I think a natural human response to being ignored. But in reality, it's not. You're not necessarily being ignored. As you said, the recruiter is potentially busy, or they're just doing other things. Maybe they didn't get the email. What sort of advice would you give to those students who are sort of demotivated because they keep on getting quote unquote ignored by these recruiters?
Yeah, so I'll also tie that back to interviews as well. That you send that thank you email, or you don't hear back from the interview within 2 weeks, or you send an email about your interest and you haven't heard back. That's perfectly fine. That's very normal. Very rarely will recruiters only recruit at one school. And so different schools have different timelines. And so let's say, you know, I interviewed you on September 1st. Well, maybe I had interviews at my next school on September 8th, a week later, right? I'm not going to get back to everybody from that September 1st interview until I have that second round of interviews. And so you might, and that could be a 2-week span, that could be a 2-3 week span. So that's obviously for you, you're like, well, when am I hearing back? Well, like I can't offer you until I talk to all of my students, right? So even if it is 2 or 3 weeks later, like don't take that personally. I think that sending a gentle follow-up email is always something that I recommend, right? Hey, this is an opportunity I'm really excited about, wanted to see what the status of my application was, or what other next steps I can do. That's something if I'm busy, I'm like, another email, but I would never like hold that to the detriment of the student.
And speaking of those emails, is there any email that you've purposely ignored because of maybe the grammar was terrible, or they used an emoji, or I'm sure you've come across a bunch of this stuff, right? Am I wrong?
I'm waiting on an emoji. You never got an emoji? One.
Well, I'm assuming because I've sent a lot of emails recently from my phone, and I've naturally just wanted to put a smiley face in there just to make myself sound more friendly.
What's the importance of professional communication?
I think, yeah. So maybe like no like 100 emojis and no like smile emojis, right? Like I think we can avoid emojis, but I think having some energy and some excitement, exclamation points are fine. Okay. I think understanding the industry is also really important. But I think that having emotion in the emails is good. Tying back to, what was your original question?
Just about if, like in your experience, if you've seen what sort of emails you actually have ignored because you just they were just disgraceful emails.
Oh my God, long, really, really long emails.
Okay.
Because I'll see it and it's intimidating to read.
Too long to read.
If it's too long,
just ignore it.
It depends, right? Because I know even in one of our training sessions, somebody said that's actually what separated themselves. So I think a lot of this advice that you guys hear in the recruiting process, you know, it works for a lot of people, and I try to keep the advice general enough that it's applicable. But there are going to be times where I say avoid this where it would actually work. So I think being thoughtful about, you know, your situation best. Like if it's a gut feeling, if you think it's wrong, don't do it. But for me personally, like really long emails, like I frankly don't have time for it as a recruiter, right? If it's, I've had people send what looks like a cover letter in an email, and I'm just like, I don't have the time, nor the energy, nor the interest to read a 5-page paragraph dissertation on why I should interview you. I think maybe somebody who is not a recruiter, maybe who's somebody who's in the business and that is not accustomed to getting all these emails, I think then that would be a little bit more appropriate. But I think that keeping it short and sweet and really tying it back to like a thesis statement of a paper, right? I want the thesis statement of your paper or the abstract of your paper. I don't want your actual paper.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot. Do you have anything else, Chris?
Yeah, you mentioned interviewing. So we've talked a lot about how to stand out at a career fair. What about in an interview? Because I know I've talked to some, not necessarily recruiters, but people who do interviews and they're like, I'm looking for someone who can just hold a conversation. Whereas others are like, I'm really looking for someone who's very knowledgeable about the industry. So like, just from your perspective, when you're interviewing students, how can they stand out in those?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fantastic question. I think, frankly, it's very similar to the career fair.
Okay.
I think it's doing a little bit more research, right? I think it's okay at a career fair. I would never ding somebody for like, hi, I'm very analytical, very creative. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what opportunities that you have that could fit that. That's fine, right? A lot of my job as a recruiter is to helping educate. Once we get to the interview phase, that kind of question, what role is this? Like you really do have to go in having done your research. That really does matter. So I think with an interview, doing that research beforehand, really understanding, you really shouldn't be asking questions that you can find out on the website. And so going to that research role before an interview, I spend so much time working on job descriptions, working on a recruiting website, looking at our employer brand, right? We spend time and resources on it for you to utilize. We literally give you the information that we then want you to tell us, right? And so obviously you're not just like spitting back exactly what you saw on the website, but doing that due diligence up front is really important. I think that to your point about having a conversation with somebody who can have a conversation, depending on the size of the company you're interviewing for, you could be interviewing with your boss, right? So I think that, advice that I got a while ago that I try and use to this day is, I want to be interviewing somebody for my team that I'd want to get drinks with after work, right? So I think that being yourself, being personable, like that's not frowned upon at all. And I think interviews, it depends on the company obviously, but they should feel like a conversation if that's going to be a good fit. So don't be afraid to, and I'm not saying don't be professional, but don't be afraid to get a little casual, crack little dumb jokes, like that's perfectly fine if that kind of fits in with your brand and how you carry yourself. But I think doing that research, being yourself, right? If you got the interview, especially your GW student, you're probably going for a lot of really competitive jobs. Like you're there for a reason. The recruiter is very often like, recruiter, I'd love to be able to hire everybody I interview. That means I did a really good job selecting people. So you are already given almost like the benefit of the doubt by going into that interview. So carry that confidence, because you wouldn't be sitting in that seat if you weren't at least, at a baseline level really ready for that role. So confidence, doing the research, being yourself and being personable, I think will carry yourself a really long way in an interview. And then something that I think people talk about a lot and like seems like such common knowledge, but is so often so underutilized is the questions at the end. I have seen questions at the end turn somebody who would have been a no to a maybe, turn somebody who would have been a maybe to a yes, turn somebody who was a yes to hire them on my team, right? Those questions at the end are partially there for you to brag about all the research that you did. And so I think a really important rule of thumb, again, similar to the career fair, is you should, at the end of an interview, you should ask a question that you can only ask that person or only ask that company, because that shows that you did the research.
So not just what's the culture here.
Exactly, and I think that's an important question. Don't get me wrong. Like questions you can ask any company, right? Like I love talking about the culture at Macy's. That's something I could talk about for hours, and that can be one of your questions. But if all of your questions are something you can ask any interviewer for any company, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because also, like, this could be the next step of your career, right? There's probably information that you don't have that you want to have, right? And so obviously don't necessarily ask like, what's my starting salary, right? Or what's my starting rate in a first round interview, right? Those are important pieces of information that you can get along the way. But there is definitely qualitative information about that company that you don't have all of it, frankly. So really using that time selfishly to get the information that you're looking for, but also to brag about your research.
Right. The culture at GW so strongly is centered around getting an internship and getting a job. I mean, students look for internships their freshman year. So I think if they listen to the entirety of this podcast, they will be much better suited to actually getting a job. So thank you for spending the time here to give us all this knowledge. Did you have?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one final question. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for
Yeah.
any student at this school that we may have not, we may have skipped over?
I would say try something new and push your comfort zone. I remember getting the Macy's offer. I had 2 weeks to make my decision. I asked for an extension, even though I really wasn't in the process anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right? I just wanted more time to make my decision because I was uncomfortable with the idea of New York. Right? Like I really loved the job. Like if that job had been in Baltimore or DC, I would have accepted on the phone. But I was really uncomfortable with, I grew up in the area. I went to GW obviously. But that was a good thing that I had pushed myself and I had tried something new. I think that I really strongly encourage somebody, obviously if it feels off for reasons and you don't have a good gut feeling about it, like don't accept it.
Right.
But if it's off because it's uncomfortable or it's new or you're nervous about the opportunity, that's such a good sign that you should be taking that job. So I think push your limits, push your comfort zone, try something new, and you'll probably surprise yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate
Of
it.
course. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, guys. Christopher Kalloo, my little
Christopher
end of
Kalloo.
podcast plug.
Do you have you want to give out an email?
No.
Too early for
LinkedIn. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always on there, and looking forward to connecting with any and everybody.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the first episode of The Bottom Line. Tell your friends and family about it, and make sure to check back soon for future episodes. Bye-bye.